Hi everyone and welcome to another spooky episode of Better Mankind. There's a lot of scary places in this mysterious world of ours, but the ones I've chosen for this video takes the definition of scary to a whole new level. So sit back and relax as I count down the 5 scariest places in the world you should never visit alone. Number 5. Poveglia Island. If you think a modern day plague outbreak like the Ebola virus is something to fear, then I suggest you think again and look up the bubonic plague of 1347. This deadly bacterial infection managed to wipe out over 25 million people in a span of just 3 years, which is monstrous in comparison to the Ebola virus death toll of only 11,300. By 1348, the bubonic plague arrived in Venice, and Poveglia Island, like many other small islands at the time, became a quarantine colony. The plague killed 1 out of 3 Europeans, and fearing the spread of the disease, Venice exiled many of its symptom-bearing citizens to Poveglia. This basically meant that you were sent there to die. At the island centre, the dead and those too sick to protest were burned on giant pyres. This included the tens of thousands of Venice citizens dying on the mainland. These fires would burn once more in 1656 when the Black Death wiped out another 1.25 million people from the world's population. It is estimated that over 100,000 people died on Poveglia Island, and for its small size this is quite a number. In the late 1800s, Poveglia was home to the mentally insane in a poorly constructed asylum which was used more as a place of exile rather than rehabilitation. There are also rumours that in the 1930s, a doctor performed strange experiments on the patients and eventually went mad and threw himself from the asylum's tall bell tower. Though the bell tower was removed decades ago, locals still claim to hear its chimes echo from the lonely island. By the mid-20th century, the facility was converted into a geriatric centre, which closed in 1975. Today, the entire island is abandoned. Locals and tourists are prohibited from visiting, and fishermen steer clear, believing the place is cursed. In recent years, Italian construction crews attempted to restore the former hospital building, but abruptly stopped without explanation, leaving locals to speculate that they were driven away by the island's dark forces. In 2009, the popular paranormal show Ghost Adventures did an episode on Poveglia Island, and I would have to say that it's one of the scariest episodes from this particular show.
Walking towards us.
Oh my god! What was that? Settle up, it's okay.
Oh my god, dude.
It's okay.
No, that's not okay, man. When that noise happened, an energy burst went through my body, bro. No.
What was the noise?
Don't know.
Number 4. The Paris Catacombs. Paris is well known for being the city of romance, but directly underneath its streets lie the remains of over 6 million people. You see, back in 1785, Paris was overflowing with corpses, and their solution at the time was to empty out the cemeteries and dump the bodies in an abandoned 15th century quarry directly under the city. The bodies were painstakingly transferred over a 14-year period from 1785 to 1814. The catacombs themselves are only a small section of the labyrinth of tunnels stretching over 200 miles below the city streets, and for many years it has been open to the public for guided tours. So why is this place so scary? Well, being surrounded by the remains of over 6 million people is good enough for most, but over the course of more than 3 centuries, a countless number of people have ventured into the so-called Empire of the Dead and have never been seen or heard from again. One such case was of a doorkeeper and porter for the Val de Grace Hospital who ventured into the catacombs through a staircase accessible from the hospital's courtyard. He was never seen alive again until his body was found in 1804, 10 years after he had gone missing. In a cruel twist of fate, his remains were found only a few feet away from an exit, and yet he never managed to get out. Although there are guided tours of the catacombs, there are more adventurous explorers referred to as cataphiles who access the tunnels through secret illegal entrances located all over the city. Exploring these areas can be quite dangerous due to the instability of the aging structure. It is very easy to get lost and disoriented, and crying for help won't make a difference. In the early 90s, a man decided to explore the catacombs on his own and left behind some chilling camcorder footage that to this day can't be explained. The footage was discovered many years after the man had entered the catacombs and is possibly the very last record of his life. The footage was reviewed by filmmaker Francis Friedland, who said that there was around 40 minutes of video in total. Near the end of the video, things take a bizarre turn when the man encounters a spooky painting on the wall and starts frantically running through the tunnels as if he was being chased by something or someone. Eventually he is so freaked out that he abruptly drops the camera and can be heard running away into the darkness. The man does not return to the camera and it continues filming until the battery dies. No one really knows if the footage on this camera is real or fake, and whether or not the man ever made it out of the tunnel alive. Nevertheless, this is one place you should never explore on your own. Number 3. Oya Berkshire Forest. This place is regarded by many as the most haunted forest in the world. Situated near Cluj-Napoca, Romania, it covers an area of over 250 hectares and is often referred to as the Bermuda Triangle of this country. It has a reputation for intense paranormal activity and unexplained events. Reports have included ghost sightings, unexplained apparitions, faces appearing in photographs that were not visible to the naked eye, and in the 1970s it was quite the hotspot for UFO activity. Visitors to the forest often report intense feelings of anxiety and a feeling of being constantly watched. Furthermore, the local vegetation is very bizarre in appearance and looks more like something out of a make-believe story. Most people who live near the forest are afraid to enter it due to the stories and legends that have been handed down from one generation to the next. They believe that those who visit the site stand a good chance of never returning back home. Many of the locals who have been brave enough to venture into the forest complained of physical harm, including rashes, nausea, vomiting, migraines, burns, scratches, anxiety, and other unusual sensations. This dense forest first gained notoriety in the late 1960s when a biologist named Alexandru Sift snapped several amazing photos of a flying disc-shaped object in the sky above the forest. On August 18, 1968, a military technician named Emil Barnier also captured a famous photograph of a saucer flying over the forest. The most common phenomenon includes the sudden appearance of mysterious orbs of light. People also report hearing disembodied female voices breaking the heavy silence, giggling, and even apparitions. Some believe that the forest is a gateway to another dimension, and people have been known to disappear. Several stories tell of people entering the forest and experiencing missing time. One such story focuses on a 5-year-old girl who wandered into the woods and disappeared only to emerge from the forest 5 years later wearing the same untarnished clothes that she wore the day she vanished, with no memory of what happened during that time. The paranormal activity seems to be mainly focused on a particular section of the forest that's also a vegetation dead zone. It is nearly a perfect circle in the woods where nothing ever grows. Some samples have been taken from the site and analysed, but the results show nothing that should prevent plant life from growing. However, it was mentioned on the Ghost Adventures episode that the soil does contain some traces of radiation believed to have been caused by an alleged UFO landing in the area. Apparently this was also the location where a huge number of Romanian peasants were once massacred and their spirits won't allow anything to grow in the circle. UFOs, a dead vegetation zone, lights with no logical source, poltergeist activity, EVP activity and malfunctioning electronics have all been documented paranormal events in this area. And although some of the stories about this creepy location may be slightly exaggerated, it is hard to dismiss the fact that strange things are happening in this place that we may never be able to explain. Number 2. Eastern State Penitentiary, Pennsylvania. Built in 1829, it is regarded as one of the world's most haunted prisons, having housed some of the worst criminals imaginable. Over a 100-year period, it was estimated that over 75,000 prisoners were incarcerated here. They were all kept in solitary confinement, and to keep them from communicating with other inmates, full masks would be placed over their heads whenever they were moved. A number of guards were killed by some of the prisoners, and hundreds of inmates died here during the tuberculosis epidemic. Many of the prisoners also committed suicide, maybe in an attempt to free themselves from the solitary confinement, and yet their presence is still felt throughout the building. Many people have heard phantom footsteps in the upper hallway of cell block 12, as if someone was dragging their feet along the sand-covered floors. Another form of punishment was called the mad chair, where many prisoners would actually go mad even before their punishment ended. They would sit them down in this chair and tie leather straps around them so tight that on many occasions would stop their circulation, requiring limbs to be amputated. If that wasn't bad enough, they would leave them there for days on end without any food. The prison was also home to Al Capone, one of the most notorious criminals of that era. While serving time in the prison, he believed that he was being haunted by the spirit of Jimmy Clark, who was one of the victims in the St. Valentine's massacre. Many people that have worked and visited the prison have reported being hit, shoved, and one woman was even slapped on the backside in the men's shower block. One of the most legendary tales comes from Gary Johnson, who helps maintain the crumbling old locks at the prison. In the early 90s, he had just opened an old lock in cell block 4 when he says a force gripped him so tightly that he was unable to move. He described a negative, horrible energy that exploded out of the cell. He also said that tormented faces appeared on the cell walls and that one form in particular beckoned him. Over the years, Eastern State Penitentiary has been featured on a number of paranormal shows such as Ghost Adventures and Most Haunted Live. Many visitors to the prison don't always experience paranormal activity, but for every skeptic, there are many who swear that they have either seen, heard, or felt something unworldly in this place. Number 1. Waverly Hills Sanatorium. By the start of the 20th century, 450 Americans on average were dying every day from tuberculosis, otherwise known as the White Plague. There was no known cure, and victims would die a bloody and excruciating death. The disease was reaching epidemic proportions, and it was thought that the clean air of the mountains along with a healthy diet and plenty of sunshine could help cure the sickness. So in 1910, the Waverly Hills Sanatorium was built in Louisville, Kentucky. This huge 5-story hospital was capable of accommodating up to 500 patients at a time. Although many people went there with the intention of getting better, the majority of patients left the building in a coffin. It is estimated that up to 63,000 people died a bloody and excruciating death at Waverly, and at the height of the epidemic they had a death every single hour. So the staff was having to dispose of so many bodies a day that they started to pile them up in the cold storage room of the kitchen. You can only imagine how discouraging this would have been for the living patients still trying to get better. So it was decided that the most efficient way to get rid of the bodies was to send them directly from the morgue through to a supply tunnel located underneath Waverly. The tunnel was 500 feet in length and connected the hospital basement to the foot of the hill. On one side it had stairs, and on the other a motorised pulley system that was used to transport supplies from the bottom of the hill to the hospital. So many dead bodies were transported through this section that it was aptly named the Death Tunnel. Many ghost hunters have reported seeing strange apparitions and have also heard footsteps beside their own while walking through the tunnel. Waverly Hills was also the site of at least 2 suicides, which strangely enough took place in the same room. In 1928, Mary was the head nurse at Waverly when she became pregnant by one of the doctors at the hospital. The doctor was married, and wanting nothing to do with the baby, he dragged Mary to the operating theatre and forced her to have an abortion while 3 other men held her down. But during the procedure something went terribly wrong and the men panicked. They dragged her body covered in blood and hanged her outside room 502. The doctor, who was the father of the child, was said to have been the one that kicked the chair from under her. The aborted baby was supposedly thrown down the body chute in the basement and then hidden in one of the coffins of a TB patient who was sent home for burial. It is reported that people that enter this room often feel very nauseated and complain of stomach pain. People also claim to have seen Mary's ghost near room 502, perhaps searching for her lost baby. Not 4 years later, another nurse who worked in room 502 jumped off the roof patio to her death. While no records exist to explain why she did this, some believe she was pushed off the edge. Who might have done this and why, no one really knows. There have also been reports of shadow people roaming the hallways, and one of these entities, called the Creeper, is described as a man that hates any visitors. Disturbingly, he is said to have no face and crawls around on all 4s. He has mainly been seen along the walls and ceiling of the 4th floor, rushing towards visitors, leaving them paralysed with fear. With all of the suffering that occurred at Waverly Hills, it's no surprise that so much paranormal activity occurs in this building. The sounds of coughing and crying have been heard emanating from the walls, along with ghostly faces staring out aimlessly through the windows. Children are also heard playing and singing nursery rhymes, while doctors in white coats have been seen walking through walls. Haunted sanatoriums in general are scary, but the horrific stories from Waverly Hills are downright terrifying. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed putting it together. If you like my content, please give me the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Also, please don't forget to click the bell icon if you would like to be notified when I upload new content. This will be my last video for 2018, so I wish you all a happy and safe New Year's Eve, and I look forward to creating more videos for you in 2019. Take care, and as always, be good to each other.